I had to give an example of a setback I faced, I always think back, to, 2019. That's iconic. It's a trauma. For those that don't know, we started the business in 2012, completely bootstrapped, never had any investors, no loans, no partners, nothing, not at any point. And, started the business $500 to my name. As we started to grow and scale, we gained a lot of momentum. I remember, I think in 2015, we did $1 million. And as we were growing, I think by 2018, we'd gone from, I believe it was at the time, 5 to about 15, 16 million. And this was at the end of 2018. And all things were going right. Everything was going amazing. We had just did the first Game Changer Summit, like our first Off from Growth conference. We were really growing in terms of our brand. We're kind of going from like small unknown company. Yeah, we just released the book. The Game Changing Attorney came out at the end of 2018 in October. And we finished that year with a ton of wins and revenue had tripled. So we just become like an 8-figure business. I thought everything was perfect. And then we come into the new year in 2019 and all hell breaks loose. So we had outgrown a lot of our infrastructure. So a lot of the systems that we were using before, like as the business tripled, overnight, quite literally, the processes did not hold. Like the ones that kind of served us well in the previous years were not great at the kind of the new level of structure. Similarly, in terms of all the technology that we were using, even down to like billing, even down to like project management, every single thing had essentially been outgrown. Oh yeah, we also just did have a newborn. That is true in December. So Jessica, you were at home and ish. So what happened is that this created a lot of stress and tension on the business. We were trying to do much more with less, and we had never grown at that pace before. How many businesses triple literally overnight? This is from like November to December. So we came into January, and there were all sorts of team members. I remember, I think it was at the time, it was like maybe 25% of the organization that, put their hand up and said, I'm out. They raised the flag and said, I am not interested in doing this, because we were doing long hours and late nights, and we were coming on weekends because, we didn't want to have any effect on the client experience, right? Like we were scaling up and we had to obviously bring in new platforms, create new processes, new systems, et cetera. And we were going 24/7, 365, but this is not something that was working for everyone. So as we were losing people one after another, you're talking like 1 in 4 people in the organization. You start to really question your leadership, and you start to question do you really know what you're doing? And at the time, truthfully, I don't know that I did. This is the first time we'd ever experienced a growth rate like that. And at the same time, it wasn't that we were just trying to solve for one thing. You're solving for something in every single department at the exact same time, while still having to deal with like the level of fulfillment. So what was the lesson in it? Now, we did obviously navigate through it. And the long story short is we finished that year at the end of 2019. It was the best year in the history of the company. And we had transformed our culture entirely. So there was a lot of lessons that we garnered from that. One was in the fact that a lot of businesses realize these things over time. I think you can really figure out who you really have in the foxhole with you and who are going to be your A players and the super committed when an organization is stress tested, right? You don't really figure this out on a day-to-day basis if there's no intensity, right? Like if you can have somebody that's potentially a low performer or not super engaged, but they can hang around for a really long time. I think one of the things that can push them out is when the expectations go up and the standards go up and the pace increases. That's when you really find out who's with you, right? And we found that out because I know sometimes people hear this story and they think, well, 25% of the people left. The side they don't hear is 75% of the organization stayed, right? And those were our killers, right? Those are our A players, and what we later build the organization around them. It's also realizing that we were not without fault by no means. I at the time just had never led an organization of that scale. We had never navigated these things before. There was a lot of unknowns, and I wish we would have known. We could have planned better. That's always the thing you hear, right? Oh, we could have planned better. Yes, I could. If I could predict the future, we had anticipated what we anticipated, and the results had surprised us, and we had even exceeded our largest expectations. But even so, when I look back at that, it's like now we're much more proactive. We laid the groundwork very early on. We're planning years ahead. We're very much focused on infrastructure first now. And making sure that we have the infrastructure and the capacity to support anything we want to do before we even do it. In terms of our hiring process, that was transformed entirely in terms of how we vet candidates and in terms of how we even attract candidates and ramp them up and set them up for success. It's very different today than it used to be. And then also just as a culture in terms of our standards. Early on, there was a lot of like buying love, right? We were trying to make a lot of people happy versus now, I don't know that it's a leader's job to be responsible for anyone's happiness, right? We want to provide opportunity. We want to provide support. We want to provide training. We want to align with high accountable individuals, but I don't know that you can control anybody's level of effort. I don't know if you can control anybody's happiness per se. I don't think that's the role of any business or organization. So it's just really realigning standards. And, we learned a lot that year. I think that the lessons of that year, especially at the start of that year, is really the reason why we've grown so much since that point. Because if we took that scenario and we did not actually level up as leaders, and we did not level up the culture, and we did not focus on, this is really around the time we implemented core values. This is around the time we set the vision. All of those things that were not in place prior. So many lessons learned that we applied that would lead to the future growth of the business. So I say this in full circle coming at this, is that whenever you experience any setback, it's a setback, but there's also a lesson there. And if you can learn from the lessons, it's not just like experiencing that pain, but really being able to analyze and reflect on it in terms of, okay, well, what is truly the lesson here? And it's not just gaining new information, but ultimately changing behavior. And if you truly level up from that, you're always going to grow and you're always going to evolve. I find that those that don't grow and evolve are the ones that don't really take away the lessons from their experiences.